We're very proud of the fact that we are able to continue with this tradition of being able to showcase your work and all the wonderful things that you do throughout the year to help your students and to become better teachers. And, as you all know, being a teacher or a professor in this college can be challenging at times, and your willingness to continually improve and come up with new ways of engaging our students is just fantastic. And I like to show that and share that with other people, with other faculty here, so that they can follow that wonderful lead. Today's topic is practicing open pedagogy at Montgomery College. We have three wonderful presenters who are here with us. Each one will have some wonderful things to say so that we can, grow and understand more about open pedagogy. We're going to start with Mary Beth Johnson. She has a presentation coming up. There we go. So everybody give her a round.
And I think you ought to give a hand to Tom Cantu, because he's the one that started this whole thing. Anyhow, again, I'm Mary Beth Johnson. I'm with the School of Education. I'm their field experience coordinator at Tacoma Park, and my dean got me interested in this journey, so I'm going to go with what happened. The first thing I did was after I took online courses, was take this Passport online class. And it was awesome because I really did learn about OERs and how to use them. And you'll see later that we used them for everything in this presentation, which was a challenge. Then I signed up. My next step was to sign up for this Open Pedagogy Fellowship in the summer, and my partner was Mitchell Tropin, and we were told to pick one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals that we would, address. So we decided to do clean water, which is goal number 6. We wanted a focus that would apply to all of our students. We wanted something that was local, but we wanted something engaging. So this happens to be the watershed for where we are. So we knew that the students would be engaged, and especially my education students. One of the things I tried to promote in the reading class that I teach is to have a STEM component where students actually learn science, but they apply it to reading nonfiction. All right, so these are some of the sub-goals of this number 6 clean water goal. First of all, to have universal and equitable access to safe and effective water, to improve water quality, and to protect or restore water-related ecosystems. And this particularly appealed to my education students because they often have projects with their elementary or middle school students that work with restoration. So, this is what we try to do. Mitch was teaching a communication class plus English. I was doing the field experience plus the reading. And we each had a group project that was required for our courses. So, we decided we'd do 3, where we were tasked with doing 3 different things. So, we thought we'd start with a survey because Mitch had experience with that, and he shared with me how his students were engaged with this. Then we also thought, well, the next step would be either making a video or a pamphlet. And I've had experience with doing a pamphlet with students, and this happens to be the Brookside Nature Center pamphlet that students actually went and researched and we wrote and they published. And then the final step was writing a grant, because when students write grants, you actually get money. So we were actually put some feet on it. So I'm going to talk about the survey later, but I'll show you what we did next. In order to prepare them, I don't like to ask my students to do anything I haven't done. And I had never made a video. So with Gloria, this is what we did. Maybe?
I think it's your
That's a snowstorm, was it?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's appropriate for
Oh,
this.
it's coming.
Okay. All right, here we go.
Hello, I'm Professor Mary Beth Johnson. I will be explaining this assignment about creating a video or a pamphlet that is linked to the UN Sustainable Development Goal of clean water. So, what is a United Nations Sustainable Development Goal? These are 17 goals developed by the United Nations that countries and partnerships hope to achieve by 2030. The goals address a variety of topics, such as reducing poverty, increasing health, and investigating solutions for consumption of resources and energy. Climate change and water usage are also included in the goals. As a student in this class, you are a part of a college-wide effort to increase education and empower students through open pedagogy. So you might ask, what is open pedagogy? It's an educational practice that places you, the student, at the center of your own learning. You also have free access to materials that are OERs, Open Educational Resources. Working with other students, you will be able to focus on a renewable assignment. A renewable assignment is one that can be replicated and used in multiple situations versus a disposable assignment that is a teacher-driven and is completed and used only one time. When students become agents of change, students are empowered through their research and findings to have an impact on their community. For this assignment, students will focus on clean water, which is part of the United Nations Sustainable Goal 6. Some of the sub-goals of this goal are safe and affordable drinking water. In Montgomery County and surrounding counties, there are places where people have wells and are not connected to public water supply, nor can they afford to be. Both DC and Prince George's county systems have had concerns about lead in their water. Another goal is pollution control. This can be seen as close as Baltimore, where Mr. Trash Wheel, which is a giant trash vessel, collects trash from the Jones Falls River that flows down to the Baltimore Inner Harbor, thus preventing the trash from going out to the Chesapeake Bay. Another sub-goal is ecosystems. These are areas that need protection and restoration. They include mountains, forests, wetlands, rivers, aquifers, and lakes. As students, you will be working to find out information about the local water quality. You can choose a location from any of the local counties in Maryland, as well as Washington, D.C. You might want to find out what components in water are tested. Is it just lead, copper, contaminants such as viruses or bacteria? What about pesticides and herbicides? Good sources of information about local water are public agencies that are responsible for water quality. One example in this area is the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, which supplies water for many counties. However, there are other sources that monitor water quality, such as state and federal agencies, such as the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, county public works. Here we have a Howard County brochure about clean water. School systems, watchdog organizations such as the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. You can also look at websites, public hearings, public information programs, and even legislation like the Federal Clean Water Act. What are some issues that might threaten local water? Could it be lead in the drinking water, as in Flint, Michigan? Drilling or fracking in the Chesapeake Bay and surrounding counties? Chemical plants? Discharge from nuclear plants? Pollution and runoff from herbicides and pesticides? So how can students help maintain water quality or restore water ecosystems? Some of the ways are: create awareness in the community, participate in civic groups such as the Slide Hill Creek Stream Sweep to clean up the creek. Education students have an opportunity to involve students at local schools in participation in clean water activities and testing. Your assignment is to conduct your research in a specific area about clean water. Then you will present your research and findings in a video for no longer than 5 minutes, or in a pamphlet that you can distribute to the class. An extra credit option is a 1-page fact sheet on the local clean water issues that you've researched. From your professor, you will receive a specific list of project requirements along with a grading rubric for either the video or the pamphlet. Best of luck in your investigations on clean water. You are on your way to be an agent of change.
Okay. I don't want to do the whole thing. Gloria, I don't want to go out with the whole thing. Thank you. Thanks. My luck is that I go out with the whole thing and then we all start again. But anyhow, the other part of these assignments, I told you, was the grant. And what the students would do is they write an action plan and they would describe the specifics. And then they would have to actually come up with a funding number. And for our education students, we would want them to implement it for our K-12 students. So how are they actually going to do this? So after they presented the proposal and we reviewed it as their professors, they could share it with the local community group. And education students have an opportunity to partner with a local host MCPS school and to actually get the funds to do this. So, again, the final objectives of this were the importance and relevance of the clean water, using the OERs, and using a renewable assignment and discovering how it can be used in future assignments. So, this is I'm now moved to the classroom. This is what I told my students. I always start with a activity that they would do. They were doing a STEM activity, and they would have to layer different size rocks and sand to see if they could actually clean dirty water. And you'll see here that it works. So this one didn't quite work, but you got to understand all these materials are recyclable materials. And you know, if you use for your filter, if you use the dollar store napkins, sometimes they're not. It's not like using the giant ones of Safeway. But we got clean water in here, and it captured the dirt. So the other part of this, my reading students use this reading nonfiction by Kylene Beers and Robert Prost. And in fact, I found out after I started using it and told a colleague that now Shady Grove at Towson is using it. And she told me that UMBC was using it. So we're on top of things here. Anyhow, what Beers found in her research was that if we have students who are low performing, they've been taught low performing skills. Our highly skilled readers are taught to draw logical inferences and think about the author's point of view. So for my students, I would show them, here's a question that is a low level question, and here's one that you're using that would actually be a higher level and take more thinking. So, she also has particular strategies in her book. And this particular one, she calls them signposts. And this one was quoted words. So this is a higher level skill for readers. So what you're doing is looking if the writer is, the quote that you find is the voice of authority, is it a personal perspective, or is it another person's words? And here's some of two of the books that we used. A River Ran Wild, and the students would look for, because these are types of books that they would be using in the classroom with students. And this one is very interesting. Chattanooga Sludge. This has really, truly happened, where they cleaned up the Chattanooga River. So, and again, these are the reading skills that these signposts would incorporate. So, after we've done this, you know, they record all their information. They put the team in the conclusion. They always have to have a so what. What does this mean? And then to introduce the UN SDG project, how they were a part of the open the students. It was a college-wide effort. And then this is just the video that I showed them then. So, this is the assignment for the survey. You're going to come, they had a partner, but some of them decided to do it by themselves. Anyhow, they had to come up with 3 questions. Why clean water matters, what are clean water issues in the community, and what can be done to promote clean water. And then their instructions were to go out to interview at least 10 people. They could do it in person, they could do it online, they could do it on Facebook, they could do any way they wanted to. But they had to come back and report their findings. So we got our survey here, person showing their graph. And this blew me away, this student. She did a online survey, but she also did her PowerPoint about, here's her questions: what percentage of the world's water do you believe is accessible? And then she graphed their responses. Then her other question was, do you treat your water in any way to make it safer before drinking? And she said most don't. And finally, in many places, accessible fresh water is not clean enough for drinking. What method do you believe works best to clean contaminated water? And you can see here, they thought the pink is the treating the water with chemicals, which we do. if we are able to. So, my next part of this journey was, thank you to T, is developing a Z course using open pedagogy and to use the OER resources, and again to incorporate these STEM activities and to teach these non-fiction reading strategies, which are so important to our students today. So, it always takes a village to do it, and these are all my people. So we need to give Dr. Smith a big hand, because she was at the beginning. So, and we're going to take questions at the end, correct?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay, Mary, maybe you're up.
Oh, okay.
You're up.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you very much.
This is for you. Okay, thanks.
Gotcha. Okay. So click the link. So I think I need to go to Chrome and get out of here. Yeah. I think it's just the browser. They're going to sort it together.
Oh,
I already copied it.
You did.
You developed something that they never copied with us.
You guys, just one moment. Technical difficulties.
Do we not have Chrome on here?
Yes.
Do you have to log in your Gmail?
Yeah, I can do that. Might be easier just to open up the bottom.
Yes.
Go down to the bottom.
Maybe that's
Where's
why.
Starfront? Not there. Yeah. Look at all programs.
No, the link is here only.
Oh, okay. So see what they have from here. That's why it's not. So this is
When you click on,
minus the blizzard.
click on all programs.
First, I took my probably. Yeah, they wouldn't allow the advanced drive, so I went to cancel the tour. Yeah.
When you go to that start,
So
if
I
you
saw
click
this
on
other
all
one.
programs, it should show Chrome, correct?
Okay.
Yeah, but it's not coming up.
So click on all, not there, do all programs.
But above you, maybe I can see a little bit of
Right
thing on
there.
that. But with the iPhone, this is
It does,
yeah.
It's
it
not
does,
there.
oh, it's not on there.
Yeah, that's what it is.
That's
It's
interesting.
not there.
Yeah.
So I was trying to do that. That's roughly 36
I thought that was
I might do
because
that.
there are a lot of things like Blackboard has.
Well, there is.
How exciting.
It's like, yeah.
Cooperative.
Nothing's Chrome.
All right.
Okay.
Let's do.
Oh, that was very exciting. It's all there. All right. All right. So I'm Mary Wall, and I'm in the math department. And so this summer, a handful of Montgomery College faculty, in collaboration with faculty from Quantum Polytechnic University, gathered together to see how we could put together our academic disciplines to create a renewable assignment. And so we focused on these 17 transformational goals, which you see here. And we were teamed up into groups. Disposable assignment is what we wanted to create, and that is one that meets a course objective, is considered only once in a learner's life, would be a disposable assignment. And we wanted to create an assignment which students could complete in a semester but could consider for a lifetime. So I worked together, you can see on the right, with Candy Ho and Pamela Ip. So Candy is in the education department at KPU, and Pamela is in the communications department at KPU, and I am in the math department at Montgomery College. And you can imagine how just, we could do a whole presentation on how a math, communications, and education discipline agreed on how to do assignments. So we targeted quality education, which is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all, as well as decent work and economic growth. So those were the two goals that we decided to target as a group. We created 3 renewable assignments. The first one was a student success assignment. So that's where students actually analyzed KPU data from a prior course, and they analyzed the barriers to international student success. And they worked together in teams to research and impact the identified barriers to the success for international students. The second assignment was a career connections assignment. Students compiled and contacted a database of 250 contacts to understand how they can achieve their goals through random interactions and chance events with individuals. And the third assignment was the numeracy assignment. Through a series of class discussions, personal reflection, and group work, students explored the crisis of innumeracy, potential causes, as well as some strategies to accomplish the envisioned goal of reducing innumeracy. So for this presentation, I'm just going to focus on the numeracy assignment. It would be too much to talk about all 3 of them. I did deploy 2 of them. So I deployed the numeracy as well as the career connections assignment. So I'll talk a little bit about the numeracy assignment. So specifically, this focuses on target 4.6. By 2030, ensure that all youth and a substantial proportion of adults, both men and women, achieve literacy and numeracy. So we further restricted this to the numeracy aspect. Okay, so if you look on the left-hand side, numeracy assignment, these are all the components to the different assignment, and I'll go through as many of those as time allows. So the first component was called, what does a mathematician look like? So,
He's a physician.
yeah, so as you see, everyone recognizes Albert Einstein, so there may be some argument, is he a physicist? I think he qualifies as a mathematician as well. So students were asked to share, names of mathematicians or mathematical role models that they looked up to share images of what a mathematician looks like. We discussed things such as imposter syndrome, so the idea that you could be successful in your mathematics courses, but really not feel like inside of yourself that you're a mathematician or you're good at math. We discussed how an individual's mathematical confidence could be undermined. Students shared their personal evolution with math, and then finally they selected a mathematician of interest and created a little biography of them. So we read a ton of papers and discussed multiple things. Some I'll mention here. Where does math imposter syndrome come from, which was actually written by the chief decision engineer, Cassie Kozerkorb from Google. So even she discusses her struggle as feeling like an imposter in the scientific community, while at the same time being a highly talented, sought-after individual in technology. So we read multiple articles, and here is a sample discussion board post. So I asked the students to share an image that comes to mind when you think of a mathematician. They could be conveyed through a written or recorded description, whatever they wanted to do. So this is actually Hua Lu Kang, who was a Chinese mathematician who I had never heard of prior to the students sharing with me. And actually, he was a politician as well, and he made very important contributions to number theory. He actually did not receive a formal university education, and was awarded several honorary PhDs. And you can see what the student wrote here. It's a little blurry, so I'll read to you, but essentially it says, however people study math, the ultimate purpose of learning mathematics is to expose those unknown puzzles, through education, people can have a better understanding of the world and the universe. This is a picture of a great mathematician teaching math in the countryside. So this was a really great insight. I deployed this in a distance learning course where you don't get an opportunity to really meet with your students and interact with them one-on-one, face-to-face. So it gave me a lot of perspective on the students. So another assignment, we had them read through the article, What Does a Mathematician Look Like? And then they jotted down their ideas. So I'm sharing a couple of excerpts of the students. So the first here says, in most of my computer science classes in college, I was one of only a few girls, which made me feel like I didn't belong. Another student wrote, if you're over 30 and you haven't finished your dissertation in mathematics or advanced physics, you've missed the boat. Though I'm still working on going towards my bachelor's and being over 30, I can say that it does feel like a challenge, but it just means that I have to work harder and smarter to achieve my goals. So I'm really learning about my students here and their perspective on being successful in mathematics and what that looks like. So I'll just read this last one here at the top. I thought mathematicians must be genius, born to be good at math, and yes, guys. I myself never had any interest in math and science when I was a teenager. I only started studying math and science at 25. But now looking back on those times, I think I was affected by the stereotypes that guys major in science and girls major in arts because they are born different and use a different side of the brain. So just a little background, this student is is an extremely successful, bright student in my course, writes beautiful proofs, and I was absolutely shocked to read this and hear about this different sides of the brain. So I didn't even try to study at all, and I just decided that I don't like math and I'm not good at it. But now that I'm studying, I realize I'm also capable of understanding, and I feel like I might really be good enough at it someday to apply it for engineering. After reading this article, I'm hopeful that I might be able to be a mathematician, even though I started studying math later than other students. So that was a really beautiful response to the assignment. So finally, the last... Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So finally, the last piece of this assignment was to create a Popplet. So they used an application called Popplet, which is actually it's totally free. And I had them place their mathematician mentor, which from the start of this project to the end, the people that they chose really became much more, I would say, contemporary. Where I was seeing Pythagoras and Albert Einstein, I started to see, for example, Katherine Johnson. So this student selected Katherine Johnson and then just gave 4 different, things about Katherine Johnson that really, struck out to her. She was the first woman of color in her line of work at NASA, best known for computing launch landing trajectories for the Apollo lunar lander, and she was educated in mathematics, actually. And if you want to learn more about Katherine Johnson, you can watch the film, very popular, Hidden Figures, to learn a little bit more. Okay. So students use the UNSDG resources to find data on a numeracy in other countries. So dare I even try this link? We'll see what happens. Okay. So this is actually provided by UNESCO. So I wrote this down so I'd get it right. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. And so they actually are working in cooperation with the Institute for Statistics, and they actually will measure target 4.6, so quality education. So the students actually selected a country, any country other than the U.S., and they were able to use this website to collect data and explore, how numeracy appears through statistics within these other countries. So they collaborated in a OneNote, which that's not going to cooperate, so that's fine. So we actually had a shared class OneNote where all of the students were posting their assignments, so they got a chance to see everyone else's work as well, which was kind of nice. So now the other feature of this project was to collect community resources to share, and then the last was to compare and contrast U.S. math instruction with an alternate country and to share their findings in a podcast. So this is a student-compiled resource list. So these are some of the things that I saw pop up, and I collected them here. The Math Learning Center was a big I saw that a lot. A lot of people said the Math Learning Center is a great place to go if you want to learn more about mathematics. So I thought that was very nice. There's a website here that was kind of neat, the BBC Skillwise. And one of the students actually told us about the Literacy Council of Montgomery County. She actually had worked there, and she said not only do they work with you in reading and writing, but they will also help you do things like balance a checkbook. And they have a lot of assistance that they do with numbers. So I had one student who actually compared U.S. math instruction to China. That was her country of choice. And so she submitted a podcast, which I'm hoping I could play. Oh.
Is that because you were signed in? Yeah, you might be. Okay.
Okay. So I was going to start that at 6 minutes and 30 seconds, which you can't really see. Here we go. Okay, let me pause this for a second. Yeah, 6 minutes here. So I'm just going to play about 2 minutes of this interview.
Implicit, unspoken expectations.
Okay, I'm going to pause that because it's really not loud enough. Let's see. Alright, so we will get back into here.
You having to study hard, and math was one of the core subjects. Naturally, everybody, studied pretty hard and put a lot of effort into mathematics.
Okay, that's really interesting for me to hear because my experience as a student in the U.S. Was very different. Here, I broadly got the impression was math was a subject that you kind of had the unspoken permission to hate. If you performed poorly in math, at least in my experience, your teachers and your peers seemed more willing to overlook it. My parents, of course, were another story, but as long as I kept my grades up, there definitely wasn't anyone who took an active hand in helping me when I struggled. Math here broadly feels like or at least at that time felt like a black box. Something where you either understood it or you didn't, and the magic just eluded you. And there was not really this feeling that this is a subject I can learn. So moving on, what was your teacher's expectations of both your mathematical abilities and your approach to the subject, specifically in China?
So our teacher expected the best of us. It was, again, very implicit. Everybody is just implicitly expected to, do their best, make the most effort. The classes were hard, and everybody knew they have to make good grades in order to, have a better life later.
So that's what I wanted to share there. I thought, it's a 16-minute long podcast. There's actually a lot of information in there. This part was pronounced to me because I thought the student who had received math instruction in China viewed their math instruction as, the single solitary most important indicator of their future success. Whereas we saw the student relate her experience with mathematics in the United States to really feeling like she had the permission to kind of not be good at math, and everyone would sort of say, that's okay, you're not really good with math, don't worry about it. And so just to see the juxtaposition of the different attitudes toward mathematics growing up, I thought was really insightful. Okay, so let me see if I can get back to my presentation. There we go. All right, so the next component of the assignment was to talk a little bit about math anxiety. We looked at video content related to math anxiety. One of them was by a gentleman by the name of Orly Rubenstein. He actually studies mathematical anxiety, more specifically the relationship of a mother's math anxiety and maternal behaviors to their children's math success and intrinsic motivation. So we looked a little bit at that data and looked at some videos produced by Orly. We also watched some interviews with Danica McKellar. I don't know if you know Danica McKellar. She was actually Winnie Cooper from the Wonder Years. And many people don't know that she actually went on to earn a PhD in mathematics. And she is really interested in empowering people with mathematics. So she writes math children's books. So we shared a little bit of her interviews with the students. And then we asked them questions like, how could one develop math anxiety? What can you do to combat math anxiety? What resources could the college provide you to help you with math anxiety? We asked them to think about a time they struggled with math and just share their thoughts and emotions. And then the final component was to create an anonymous word cloud where the students got a chance to kind of share with phrases their feeling toward really, my course, like their emotional feeling toward my course. So I'll show you that. It's a little frightening for me. So this is the word cloud that the students shared. Again, this was anonymous. They could not see what the other students had shared prior to submitting. They just had a link in which they would type their feelings. And just to give you a little bit of background, this was given around Thanksgiving. And so we were going into the break and asking them how they felt about my class and mathematics. Self-doubt, panic, avoidance, apprehension. Yes?
How did you block them from being able to see what was submitted to the word cloud?
I used a website called Mentimeter, which I can share with you later.
Cool, thanks.
Misunderstood, frustration, fear, hard, difficult, terrible at math, afraid of failure, working memory, embarrassment, discouragement, anxiety, tension, complex, sweating. So it goes on, but the one that really struck me was internal death.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I'm celebrating, Thanksgiving, having a break with my family, and I'm looking at how my students are feeling, in my class. And that was very, very powerful. So I communicate with them through Remind. So I sent them a little text. I said, here's the picture of the word cloud. I got it. It was very powerful for me as an educator. And I received like 20 thumbs up. So they just started thumbing up my statement, thumbs up, yes, we're uncomfortable.
Is there any significance to the color on your chart?
No, the color's just chosen randomly. Yeah.
Nobody said happy. One person said happy.
Yeah, so no one is happy in my class. And I realized like one person. You got one person. I have a happy. Okay. Yes, I have one happy student. So this is actually a class of 25 online learners. And I like to think of myself as an instructor that really understands students. So this really showed me how far off, how much work I have to do. Yes.
Can you repeat what exactly the question was that you had them answer?
Well, we had been doing a lot of work at that point. We had watched many videos. We had read so many different articles. We have had so many different discussion posts regarding this topic. And then I asked them to sort of anonymously share their feelings, toward the Math 284 course. So the prompt itself it's not as insightful as the materials that we read prior that kind of got them thinking, about math anxiety. And so at this point, they've already shared with other students in the class how they felt, in elementary school, which is very unusual for, Math 284 linear algebra. It's very unusual for students to share, their feelings. So we had kind of created that environment, and then they just went right through and, yeah.
Question.
Yes.
Was this done as a result of an objective put out by your department for that course? Like, is math anxiety an objective to be addressed in Math 284?
No.
So it's just extra.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
But I can see why you care.
Clearly, you're doing a good job.
Excellent.
something important to think about with your students.
I think it's great.
Yeah, yeah, it was. It just shows me how much more I need to do. So it was probably one of the most powerful things to come out of this for me was seeing this word cloud at Thanksgiving break.
To be fair to you though, math is something that, I mean, they could have had years of bad math experience before they got in your class, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's definitely a big question there, and it kind of goes back to that podcast. You know, the one student who said you have the unspoken permission to kind of dislike math or to let people to vocalize your discomfort with the material, and that it's totally acceptable and common. Whereas, for example, so I could say to a group of people, "Oh, I never balanced my checkbook," you know. But if I said, "Oh, I've never read a story to my child," you know, people would say, "Oh, you know, that's very strange." So some of it could be attitude a little bit, right? And that's what we were exploring. We're really taking this time to explore all the issues around, you know, what are some of the barriers to numeracy that are related maybe to math anxiety, that are related to maybe the community's attitude towards mathematics. You know, how could those be barriers? And you hear in this interview from the student who received math instruction in China, they felt that math was the single solitary most important subject that they needed to focus on in order to advance their life. And if you listen to more of the interview, the student will share with you, it wasn't about being good in the class, it was about getting ahead. So everyone was taking instruction outside of the classroom so that they could be ahead of the topic and material. So they want to go into the course already knowing what that material is about. So that was, if you do listen to the interview, it's there on the slide, so you can hear more about it.
So is it possible next time to get this kind of a reaction, but have a distinction between the males and the females?
That would, I guess, be possible. Yeah, I mean that would involve, I mean, there's some bioethics there, right, that you have to look into. I mean, so I traditionally don't ask my students to identify and, you know.
And the reason is that maybe more emphasis needs to be given to one of the groups rather than the other, in terms of encouragement.
Yeah, it's possible. Now, we usually don't have a tremendous amount of students in Math 284 who are female, so I can tell you that. Very rarely do I have female students in the course in the first place. So this sampling that you're looking at here is primarily male. Yes.
That just, I don't know if you looked at studies on stereotype threat, but there are exactly those kinds of studies where they give like male and female students math tests, and it's like if you just ask them like to write their gender at the top of it, like women will do more poorly on the test. Like it's I usually feel like that would be counterproductive to
yes. Well, and actually, I mean, if we go back a little bit here to this top excerpt from the discussion board, we do see this student who's, I mean, honestly, truly fantastic mathematics student, writes beautiful proofs, and I wasn't sure how much time I had. She also produced an amazing podcast about her experience learning mathematics in Korea. So I didn't know if I would have enough time to share that as well, so I did not include it. But she says right here, she was affected by the stereotypes that guys major in science and girls in math because they are born different and they use different sides of their brain. So this is a very, non-scientific statement from a very bright, talented student. And I think that a lot of the students felt like they had the permission to say these kinds of things in the discussion board, again, because of a lot of the articles that I shared. So, for example, the article I shared on imposter syndrome with, and I feel Cassie Kozyrkova, she's the chief decision scientist at Google. So, I mean, and she's writing about imposter syndrome, what it felt like for her in the tech world. So I think students kind of felt comfortable coming out and saying, here's how I feel. This is what's going on for me.
Yeah. Looking ahead, knowing that it seems universal as to how some of our female students feel about math, what could we do at MC to overcome that bias?
I mean, from everything that I've read, and I'm certainly not an expert on this, like I would say work with 12-year-old girls. There's really no difference between the mathematics testing under that age range. So the split starts around then. And myself, I have done some tutoring in the past, and I have worked with 12-year-old girls who are, they're not good at math, and their parents are telling me they're not good at math, and I'm just saying, but this isn't even true, and I don't even tutor them on the math. I just spend the whole time talking to them about how, actually they're very good at this, and then they return high grades, and they say, oh yeah, I never had any problems with this. I said, oh yeah, I told you didn't, you're fine. So I think working with that younger age range would be really helpful. Yeah.
You guys can remind us waiting for us to get through her presentation, and at the end, we can ask.
Yeah, it worked out okay because I don't have actually that much more to go through,
Okay.
So we'll be able to hit that 235. Yeah. Okay. So one of the components of the assignment was actually inspired by the marketing person who was working with me from KPU, and so we sort of thought, math has a bad reputation, so maybe we could inspire people, to through marketing to develop an interest in math. Maybe we could market mathematics, right? So one of the things that we did was we kind of scraped the memes, and I pulled, hundreds of negative connotated memes toward mathematics. So one of them you see in the upper right-hand side is, what if I told you everything you learn in math class is useless? I don't know if you know, that's Morpheus from the Matrix, and I'm teaching linear algebra, which is also called matrix algebra, so it's kind of, there's a connection there. And so we're sort of taking this approach, marketing the impossible mathematics. So I shared memes, and then I asked the students to create their own memes that had positive connotations toward mathematics. And this particular component, it was okay. It wasn't as insightful as the other parts of this assignment. So I got this meme. It says, math is in everything. Your finance is your job, understanding the world. No matter your job type or interest, numeracy is always in your best interest. And then we received this meme here, math is hard, numeracy is important. So what you can share. Okay, so then after we did all of this work, and we read, like I said, tons of articles, watched lots of videos, we had a lot of group discussions. The final part was to have the students actually, based upon everything that we did, to come up with an original strategy of their own to address this particular target. So I gave them a list of examples that they could go through, and I'll just tell you a couple of them. For example, create a Twitter account and tweet as your research mathematical role model, commenting on the global trend toward numeracy. Another one was to create an app to address the challenges to numeracy, create a podcast, interviewing various persons using mathematics in their profession. That's one of the things that we explored that I don't share here. There are so many professions that use mathematics we may not think of. For example, cosmetologists in hair, they use quite a bit of mathematics, so we brought that up. Create a marketing campaign, narrated videos, narrated PowerPoints. So the submissions are still trickling in for this final assignment. That's just a few topics that I suggested. I have two students, though, have chosen to create a game targeted toward elementary age children in mathematics. So I'll be interested to see what this game turns out to look like. And then I did receive a number of narrated PowerPoints as well. So that is really all that I had to share, and we're going to hold our questions until the panel in a moment.
So while we wait for Zach to come up and get set up, I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to go back there and get something else if you'd like to eat some more. And it will continue in a few minutes. Thank you. Yes, so you guys have like a panel.
Technology end of it.
We're going to continue. This is Carlson. He is an anthropology professor, and take it away.
Thank you, Gloria. Thanks for including me on the panel. And thank you, Shinta, and Michael Mills for giving me the opportunity to participate in the UN SDG project. I started here at MC in the summer of 2019, this past summer, and jumped right into it with the UN SDG project. So I really just dove right in. So this is sort of a reflection on this this semester of trying to implement these assignments similar to my fellow fellows. So I basically in my work as an anthropologist and as an archaeologist, I had no explicit experience with OERs per se or open pedagogy other than things like doing field projects with students. So all of my knowledge and experience came with doing what some would call active learning or experiential learning. I don't know if open pedagogy maybe is an umbrella term for all of these things. So that was my experience, not as much the OER and in textbooks, Creative Commons, but open learning. So we do things like in my research site in Ecuador, teaching students how to actually excavate, archaeological methods, involving them in other sorts of ethnographic projects, working with local indigenous communities. On the right, you see a student, for example, making bricks and learning to mix soils. In the center, we're doing organic farming. So they're actually picking habas, I think are fava beans in English. So this is the type of experience that I had. But then I wanted to take that and figure out how to implement that in a classroom. So it's a very, very different setting, and it was harder to do. I wanted to gain some experience figuring out how to take those lessons and that experience and apply it in the classroom. So for the UN SDG project, I was paired with two faculty members from KPU, Kathy Dunster and Michelle Franklin, and both of them are involved to some degree. They're sustainable horticulturalists, and so that was the combination that we were facing, that Perry talked about. In my case, it was horticulture and anthropology, and this was for a course called Human Evolution and Archaeology. So we decided that we would try to target primarily goal number 2, zero hunger. But of course, with all of these 17 goals, they're extremely interrelated, and so we were also looking at good health and well-being, sustainable cities and communities, and responsible consumption and production. And the first thing we decided to do, our first assignment that we proposed, was this one called Mapping Food Access in Our Neighborhoods. The idea being that we could have students sort of like crowdsource this information about our campus community. So this would be done here at MC, in Rockville, in Germantown, and in KPU, and we would sort of inventory all of these sources of food around our campus. And then we could have reflections about whether these are, whether we're part of a food swamp, a food desert, a food mirage, and really reflect on what that means for our access to healthy and nutritious food. And then also to think about whether those are correlated with other things like race and ethnicity. The assignment would have them all participate on this Google Maps platform so that we would be able to include all of those sources and, importantly, inventory other sources of free food. So things like food banks, places of worship, community gardens. And in the process of putting this together, I learned that there are things like the mobile market here at MC. There are already initiatives targeting food insecurity. So that was great to learn. And the idea for this, the sort of final product, would be an actual product, an openly accessible product, a map of these sources of food that the broader community, the student community, could access. This is what we started to do. So these are our two campuses, KPU, obviously on the west coast, and that's here. This would have been the Rockville campus, and so we would sort of choose a radius and figure out all of the different sources of food, and restaurants and grocery stores and farmers markets, and plot them on this map. In the end, I did not end up employing assignment 1 in my class. I did assignment 2 and assignment 3, which I'll elaborate on now. So for assignment 2 and assignment 3, we decided to focus on this category of weeds. So from a sort of evolutionary perspective and from a horticultural perspective, the idea was inspired by this rethinking of what a weed even is. We had seen this public art project by Michael Peterson. He sort of gives them awards, which I'll show you right here. Right? So this is his awards. This one was given for unique site. This one was most delicate, and the best in show. And so his point was to rethink the category of weeds and to sort of jar you, transform, make you reflect on what it means to have these weeds, to have these plants growing in the middle of these sort of concrete jungles, right? In the middle of sidewalks and urban cities. That we have these plants, and there are sources of nutritious food where you would least expect it. So we were inspired in that sense to create assignments number 2 and 3. For assignment number 2, we decided to use this free and open app called iNaturalist. Maybe some of you have used it. It looks like this. So anyone can download it and use it. It's sort of an example of citizen science where you just go and if there's a plant that interests you or an insect or animal, you take a picture of it. The entire world, the iNaturalist community identifies it. You can try to identify it yourself with a drop-down menu just based on the technology, but then someone actually confirms it for you, someone better than me. And so for our class, it was nice because we had us, the archaeology class, the human evolution class, and then we had this course of horticulture students who could actually identify the weeds. Right? So for assignment number 2, we proposed doing this sort of weed survey. So we would go around the campus, and in my case, I changed it up so that we would do it like an archaeological survey. So instead of going around and walking transects, doing a pedestrian survey, we weren't looking for surface artifacts or surface architecture, things that you would look for in an archaeological survey. We were just cataloging weeds. So we went around the campus and did this. I'll show the results a bit later on. But we used the iNaturalist app instead of something like a GPS technology. All the students had their phones or cameras and took pictures of the weeds. We cataloged all of these sources of food around the campus. And then the horticulture class at KPU started to identify all these things. And as part of it, the students would do a field journal, a field reflection. So they're actually acting as a field researcher. So I instructed them how you would actually write in a field journal, right? You put the date, you put the weather conditions, you say what your objective for the day is. And so they did that. And then there were a series of reflection questions at the end that they would answer and turn in as part of the assignment. As a sort of scaffolded assignment, we had assignment number 3 as an ethnobotany. So this was the idea that they would take those plants that they had located and identified around campus, and then they would choose one. They would do some research on those plants and figure out where they had come from. Are they native to this area? Do they come from another part of the world? How did they get here? And this is all part of this idea of the human evolutionary journey. That was the sort of link with the course material. And then to also look at what are its traditional uses, and how could we actually use some of these weeds as sort of like something that we could forage for ourselves, leave very little environmental footprint, and use them as sources of nutritious food. Okay, so the challenge then was to integrate all of these into the course. In my case, the course is based on a textbook, right? So we used the textbook, and I stuck to the material of the course. And maybe in the panel we can talk about our experiences integrating some of these assignments into the course to greater or lesser extents. But I tried to basically, I think one of the important things for these renewable assignments is also to get the student buy-in, so they understand why they're doing it, what they're doing, so that they know. Sometimes they're a little thrown off when it's not just an exam or a simple paper. Okay? And so I tried to do this by showing them the situation of food insecurity. I introduced the class. I started the course basically by reviewing this United Nations report that recently came out in May of 2019, which talks about human effects on the environment and the unprecedented rate at which species are going extinct. And this is exactly what a course in human evolution should be trying to show, in my opinion, that humans are a part of this, right? And that since sort of the origins of domestication, the story of human evolution is one of humans increasing exploitation of our environments. So this was one way to show the importance. And so I introduced, when you do a course on human evolution, you have a lot of different geological periods, starting 65 million years ago. And so I introduced this other one that some refer to as the Anthropocene, which is this period of human involvement, human exploitation of the environment. So I wanted to demonstrate that humans, although we've been on this earth for really just a blink of an eye in evolutionary time, we've had an unprecedented and drastic transformation of the earth for all of these different reasons. And also that as anthropologists, we can look at these issues in many different ways. So this course shows the biocultural perspective, the idea that we can bring to bear evidence that's biological, about sustainable food production and biodiversity, but that's also historical and cultural. And so, for example, I shared some of my own work where we look at, in the highlands of Ecuador, where there is plantation flower production. So all of the flowers that we get here in large part come from this area of Ecuador. But in the same area, this is where there are indigenous communities trying to create alternative food systems, right? Alternative economic systems where they're doing organic agriculture. And so students have the opportunity to look at both sort of methods and then see how archaeology up in the top left is related to that. So all of this was to share that there are multiple perspectives that anthropology can bring on something like food insecurity. Part of this, again, to gain their buy-in, to show the issue, was showing additional examples of how our food system has become so fraught. So again, this is also in Ecuador. This is an organically grown quinoa plant. You can see the flower plantations in the background in the same community. Locally raised guinea pigs. That's for Amy there. These are locally raised guinea pigs by members of the project. So these are raised for eating. But it's part of their local effort to rethink the food system and grow their foods, both plants and meats, locally. And what's happened is that from things like biodiverse practices, we've come to rely more and more on monoculture, things like monoculture that relies on either pesticides or on genetically modified varieties. And so I was trying to pose to them these sort of reflection questions about our food system. And that the results have resulted in high numbers of food insecurity, that these are along a scale of mild to severe food insecurity around the world, but that this isn't just a global problem, that it exists here in Montgomery County as well. So then I wanted to make it a local issue as well. Here, these are numbers from 2017. Some of the students were able to see that actually a lot of the food insecurity is where we have MC campuses. So Tacoma Park, Silver Spring, Rockville, Germantown, and that these correlate in some senses with racial and ethnic categories as well. Right? Importantly, there are studies that show how food insecurity also affects educational outcomes. So again, this is all part of this effort to bring them into the project and to try to demonstrate the importance of bringing creative ideas to this complex problem. Okay, so I had attempted to integrate the assignments into the course, tried to make it so that students weren't just confused about why we were doing these random assignments. And then I attempted to gain student buy-in and their understanding of the urgency of the moment of the food insecurity problem. And so I implemented these assignments and figured we would see what happened. So I started with this archaeological survey. This was part of the course, which is to introduce archaeological methods. And so I took that opportunity to show what archaeological survey is, how it is sort of the beginning phase of what we do as archaeologists. And that surface survey, this sort of pedestrian survey, just walking the landscape and seeing what's there, is the first step, and that's the most common form of survey. And I showed them how this works in a place like in Ecuador again. So this is students walking transects at a field school, not MC students, but this prior summer. And how you actually do this, how you record in a field notebook, how you walk those transects and record what you see, identifying concentrations of artifacts. Instead of artifacts, in our case, they were doing this with weeds. There was no beer as part of this assignment. But the idea was that they would actually be able to see the parallel with what we were doing here, looking for weeds, and how we would do this in the field as field archaeologists. And so we did it. I took, this is Germantown, right? This is Germantown. I split them into 4 grids, and then I did the same for Rockville, split it into 6 grids. And we just went outside. I split the students into groups. They had each of their sort of like transects or their grid assignments. And they went out and did it, and it was a lot of fun. It was a perfect day that we chose. This is here at Rockville and down at Germantown there. So I implemented these in 2 courses. And you can see the students there, it's just sort of like in these random areas, locating and identifying the weeds, and they're just taking pictures and submitting them to iNaturalist. And so they felt like they were, participating in this group project, which you can see here. So this is our group page, the KPU, Langley, and MC. We called it a BioBlitz survey. And by the end, there were almost 2,000 observations, and this is something that's still growing. Some of the students have been saying, I went to my backyard and was taking pictures, and so they're still doing it, and they show up in this project. I don't know if they know that, but they're still showing up. One student actually thought it would be funny to take a picture of me while we were doing the survey, and the iNaturalist community came down pretty hard on him. They identified me as Homo sapien.
Well, that's good.
It was a correct identification. So it was cool to see. I've never done this. I'm not a horticulturalist. I downloaded the app for the first time along with the students. And it was really cool. I mean, this is our project. This is our product. And students from KPU were identifying all of these. But without actually doing the research of what these plants were, it sort of meant nothing. Right? So that was the second step here. Part of the assignment, as I said, was the field notebook. So I really wanted them to feel like they were field archaeologists, as if this was a field school, like I showed at the beginning. And so some of them got creative. Some of them are artists, and they started drawing some of the weeds that they had identified, and wrote these out. Others were just sort of typed reflection questions, and yeah, they were pretty thought-provoking. And then the major part was this ethnobotany. So I ended up, in the middle of the semester, I ended up making this a two-part ethnobotany. So the first part would be choosing one of those weed species from the iNaturalist page. They would go on there and select one of them. And then the second one would be any plant that they wanted that had some sort of personal connection, maybe something to do with their family history or their ancestral foodways, or comes from their country of origin. Whatever it was, whatever the personal connection was, they would choose that and do an ethnobotany. So it was a two-part ethnobotany. At the time that I made this PowerPoint, the projects weren't in yet. There was only one person that had submitted, so she allowed me to share a piece of it. So this student, for example, chose as the weed species, she chose this broadleaf plantain. And then you can see she showed the taxonomy, the characteristics, and its cultural history. So this is part of that evolutionary journey of how not only humans, but also plants sort of co-evolved together and moved to new places along with each other. And then she found this Plantago chips recipe. So you can create that recipe. And since then, students have been presenting their ethnobotany. So I threw about half of them, and then the rest will present over the final exam week. And it's been really cool. The students have chosen all sorts of things. This same student, for the personal connection, she chose the Loroco. So her family is Salvadoran. And so she then gave a recipe for usas de Loroco. So, and other students, one student who was Persian chose saffron, and so we learned all about the saffron plant, which I didn't realize it's actually the, what do you call it, the sustainment, yeah. That's why it's so expensive, I guess. So she shared all sorts of recipes and her family history with saffron. Another student whose mother is from Peru, from the highlands of Peru, she did the coca leaf, which has this whole charged history. In my cultural anthropology class, I talk about the coca leaf, coincidentally enough. Students know about the coca leaf because of its history being turned into cocaine, right? So then students started talking about this whole history of the coca leaf. But the student herself said, well, no, this is a plant that for thousands of years has been an important part of the cultural history of the Andes. So it prompted all of these different discussions that I thought were really useful. And it was a way for them to see that human history always has a lot to do with. It's always intimately tied to our environments, to the plants that we are raised with, and that human cultures, human societies, we always have cultural ways, cultural traditions, culinary traditions, ways of actually using the resources in our environment. So I will conclude by putting these reflections on here. As one of my early first experiences with open pedagogy, I started sort of taking the opportunity to think about how I could better create these, better implement them, and maybe it's something we can talk about. Some of the things that I thought about as I was creating the presentation. And really, this is all fresh. It just wrapped up yesterday. Students were presenting, so this is all raw. But I thought maybe I could have introduced the assignments earlier, integrated it more into the course, because there's so much material in a course on human evolution. Basically 65 million years of history since mammalian expansion. That's hard to introduce these assignments and really integrate them in useful ways. So I think I would do it earlier. I'm also not a horticulturalist, and so it was both terrifying and really fun at the same time. I think the students understood that this was an area that we were sort of all learning together, that I was treading into this territory that was not my own area of expertise in terms of horticulture, but that we could use the archaeological methods and think about it differently. Think about it not as a horticulturalist, but as an anthropologist, and that was the idea. And then, I don't know if others have had this experience where I was really trying to balance the academic rigor. I put a lot of pressure on myself for students to get a lot out of it, to do the research, to do serious research, really think about it, and have those outcomes without sort of stunting the creativity. So I wanted to allow them to do this sort of open learning, experiential learning, give them the opportunity to, do PowerPoints and photo stories, whatever they wanted, while also making sure that there was an academic rigor, that they were doing serious research. So that's something that I've tried to balance. And then how do we even assess if those outcomes were achieved? Really, did students actually get the point, or was it something they just did? How do we assess that? So I'll leave it there. Maybe we can share our experiences together. Thanks.
Thank you. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to ask our three presenters to come up to the front so that we can have an open discussion. If you have anything to ask our presenters, this is the perfect time to do it. Or if you want to share some of your experiences, I think this would also be done. So we're going to push this table here so that you guys have to sit. Is Mary still here? And now, I don't think we're going to need a full hour. We'll just go as long as there are questions. And at the end, I'm going to ask Shinta Hernandez to come to the front and provide some announcements in regards to the Open Pedagogy program that we have right now. She has some really important information to share with you. Yeah. I'm getting the chairs. The big chair. Okay. Can I help? Sorry. Just tell me how to open it. I'm fine.
I'll pull it over here for you.
Thanks. I'm looking for you.
Okay. Is it low enough?
Okay, excellent. Okay.
I have a question for Mary. Ms. Johnson, you mentioned that there's a possibility due to cracking or a lot of fracking that there could be some pollution in the Chesapeake Bay.
Correct.
So is fracking going on close to Chesapeake Bay?
I believe from what I've seen just from articles, because obviously I'm doing this as an add-on to my processes and acquisition of reading, which is teaching teachers how to read or to teach reading. And there has been a lot of discussion about it and, for and against it. So as far as I know, so far, not yet, but they are proposing to do it. But again, the Chesapeake Foundation, is doing a lot of PR too about it.
Chesapeake Foundation wants it.
No. It will impact the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And this is something that, our students are, we do a lot of studies, we're all part of the watershed. And so what happens here in Montgomery County goes downstream. So we do a lot of projects in the schools. And I've had students that have written grants that, have done things like, even if when you see those painting on the sewer systems, everything goes downstream. So, yeah. Joe?
Yes, I'm a computer instructor. I do digital literacy, computer applications, computer systems. This is a question that goes across, and you're getting it first. What type of technology, I saw PowerPoint, what other technologies did you use to present the results in digital?
With I had, how things go. I thought I was going to be teaching a 15-week course, and it was an accelerated 8-week course. So I was really pushing it to get all the stuff, plus only deploy one thing. So again, I did not use, some of the technology. I can't wait to get Mary's thing about the cloud. So that we can use it, because I thought that was awesome. And, my students could use field journals too. So I'm like, wow, that's some good ideas.
I started to see you at the very end, you were talking about things that you should have done, that you would like to do, and also use different types of technology. Can you just identify those?
Yeah, so initially we wanted to use the Google Google Maps. We went back and forth on which platform to actually use, because you could do something like you could actually use ArcGIS as remaps, but that's really complicated, and I'm not sure actually what the licenses are like here at campus. So that would be a whole course in itself, just to teach them how to use ArcGIS. But then there are things like ArcGIS Online, but Google Maps seem to be the easiest in terms of allowing for a shareable platform where all students can access the same map and then input their data. In the end, I didn't implement that, so I can't speak much to its effectiveness. The iNaturalist app worked perfectly. It was great. It was a struggle at first to get all the students to sign up. I just did it in class. I said, if you have a smartphone, pull it out now, create a username, and then tell me on this piece of paper. I sent a paper out. I said, "What's your username?" to make sure that they had done it. Yeah. So there was a lot of working with students closely to make sure that the technology was working, because it can cause a lot of problems where students will just get frustrated because that's holding them up and that's not what we want. But the iNaturalist app was great for its ease of just sort of opening it up, take a picture, and then even the collaborators at KPU could then identify the plan. So it brought both sides together. Other students, I didn't encourage enough of the use of technology, like video and podcasts. Those are great final products that I could have had them do, and I think this is a learning process, and doing it again, doing it in the future, I would engage more with some of these other technologies. Would you say the podcast was your favorite?
Oh, we used a lot, yeah. So I can kind of share a little bit. So it all started with the communication with KPU. So that was all done on GoToMeeting, because they're in Canada, obviously. So we met in GoToMeeting, and then we met many times over the summer. It took a long time for us. And then we also had a OneNote where we kept all of our information. And I actually have that, as like an artifact which, many of you are interested in looking at it. And it goes through our brainstorming process where we're trying to come up with all of these ideas. So we were sort of writing in the OneNote and then reflecting and then meeting again on Google Meeting to discuss the idea we had just come up with. We would come up with an idea and then just as quickly throw it away. This won't work. And so it was really helpful. And again, I can't speak more highly of Candy and Pamela. They broadened my awareness as a math faculty so tremendously. So they brought a lot. For the numeracy assignment, obviously you saw we used the Popplet. So that's a Popplet. That's an app. Popplet. We used Mentimeter. Mentimeter. These are all free. I wanted to use technology that was native to all the students through matriculating here at Montgomery College. So we used OneNote. We also used Blackboard, the discussion board, and yeah. So you have to give a little instruction there on how to use the discussion board and how to post things. But,
that must have been fun.
but they got the hang of it. Yeah, they got the hang of it. So the students themselves communicated if they needed to through Zoom, because this is a free communication app. We have GoToMeeting through the college. So those are a few of the things. We had the audio podcast. Students created PowerPoints. So those are some of the things I can think of. Now for the other assignment, the Career Connections assignment, I actually had the students contact 250 people through HubSpot. So HubSpot is an application for email marketing. And so I shared with them MOOCs that they could watch that taught them how to use HubSpot. And then they could go in and load all of the email information in there and create drip campaigns to contact people. Students in that class also made videos. I have a tremendous amount of video content from that class. We also used LinkedIn for the Career Connections assignment. The students created a LinkedIn profile. I also had the students create their own websites for the Career Connections assignment. So each student is leaving my class with a website that we built in the class. For the numeracy assignment, I created a website for that assignment to share with the students. I'm sure I'm leaving something out, but those are the things that I can think of that we used. Being distance learning instructor, obviously we're going to use more technology than in a face-to-face room.
Mentimeter, I also use Mentimeter. It is great. I love using Mentimeter. Oftentimes I'll start class with one or two Mentimeter questions. The students, either on their computer or on their phone, it shows up with a code. They just go to menti.com, put in a code, and they're all there. And so the question shows up. I'll just ask a question that reviews either what they had to read for class that day or what we learned the previous day. So that it refreshes their memory. They know what I consider important for an exam, for example, and it's fun. So it's all anonymous. I'm not counting it as a quiz, although you could. But it's a way for them to review their own knowledge and sort of pace themselves. And they've always given it high reviews that it helps them as a tool.
Yeah, and my class was also boarded, so we always just assumed everybody. So we used the discussion board, and it was easy to, access that way.
Thank you, that was something. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a similar question. We're going to be updating a textbook, OER textbook next semester. Wanted to engage the students with making the updates to the textbook. So what would you recommend for that? Is OneNote suitable for that? Or Google Docs or just Word, Microsoft Word? Or what do you think would work?
What's the course?
Yes.
Personal finance.
Is it a book?
Yeah, there's an existing book, a PDF.
Pressbooks is a good vehicle for books. It's going to be a book, not just some other kind of lesser object. And I don't know if you have an account, but we're looking into Pressbooks at an institution level. And if you're going to do a whole book, that's the universally accepted method to do it.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Can the students have access to this and give input? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, the students.
You wanted the student input.
Yes.
To what you're talking about?
I don't know.
So you can accomplish that in Google Docs, if you wanted to. That's a convenient way. You can share a link with your class, and then they can go in and make edits. So my students do quite a bit of programming, and we use something called GitHub, and that allows you to actually pull some code. It's called a branch, and then you can make changes to the code, and then you merge it back into the branch, and Git keeps track of all of the changes. It's quite a bit of a learning curve. However, I have seen some videos on YouTube about using Git for poets and for English instruction to do, to share and document collaboration. So that's something to look into if you have a lot of time on your hands.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it might even be helpful. I've never done what you're doing myself, but from what I've heard, the experiences of others is to it's important to group off the students. So it's not the entire class working on one thing, but to group them together so that it becomes less burdensome. The sharing. So I don't know how Pressbooks works, but if you're using something like Google Docs, where it does, you don't have a million people trying to work on one document, but you split it up and there's just 3 or 4 people working on one, so that it doesn't get as crazy.
Do you want the students to be directly putting information in, or are they going to go through you? Or are you going to accept what they put in?
I was looking for comments or annotations so they could suggest changes or even different material to put in.
Sounds like a blog to me. I mean, it sounds like just a blog. But eventually somebody's going to have to put it into a book.
I'll be putting it into the book. So.
I think you can set Google Docs so it's comment only and not that they can edit the text. It sounds like that's what you don't want them to actually just go in and start spacing stuff out or whatever. Like, you want them to just put their comments on it. And you can set that in the controls in Google Docs.
Thank you.
So I guess this question is for all of you. What is your approach or strategy to grade these projects when they're so open and, like you said, you're kind of working through them for the first time and you want them to be creative? How do you grade something like this?
I think that your question is actually why I moved in the direction of mathematics, because there is a correct answer, and I always felt so irritated when someone would give me a B on an essay, or I heard a fly buzz when I died. What is the fly? Is it what I think it is? The author? I mean, so for me, the students, though, they did ask. So my students will ask, how many sentences, how many words. So we kind of worked out, not necessarily, we weren't graded on the content, but everything had to be submitted by a certain deadline. And we talked a little bit about, how many words you had to have in the subject of your LinkedIn profile. How many contacts you needed on your contact sheet, 250. So I just kept it kind of based on that. Read this article and then give a response. And then if they ask me, I would say 3 sentences at least or something. So I'm not sure how you guys went about it.
The same thing. What I would say to them, I want 3 questions answered, and I want it turned into this format. You need to use graphs, or you have options, etc., etc. And then for the video and all, we would have the time, and they had to. Present the question, and then, their research in a way that we could understand. And, it was more of a portfolio type of approach. So, it was the whole package together. It wasn't specific, question A, question B, question C.
Yeah, for me, that was part of the academic rigor versus creativity part. And for other things like a paper, there's always a grading rubric, so they know exactly, the introduction is worth 10 points, and including, this data is worth 30 points. For this, this was all part of it. I was trying to create these assignments during the semester, and I knew students always ask this. They say, well, what do I need to have? That they want to know exactly what you're asking. My approach is always like, no, let's just see. I don't, But that, I mean, for this assignment, because I hadn't done it before, right? And so it was a lot of like, we're developing this together, and I tried to create a rubric, and so there were things like they needed to have this information. So I told them exactly what information they needed to include. I didn't really put like lengths because I allowed them to do PowerPoints or other sorts of things. I more so did it in terms of the end goal, which I didn't even explain, but the end goal is to have some students compile all these into a final manual or a zine, and that manual could actually be used by anyone to see what plants all around us could be eaten or used for medicinal purposes or whatever. So I tried to have them with the end goal in mind. What are we actually doing this for? And that helped them to see, okay, I need this information in there. And I'm grading them now, and it's sort of a,
So, Michelle has had a question for some time. Let's give her an opportunity.
I guess my question is, I see all of y'all have these projects, and they're all really unique, and they all seem to tap into your passions. Like, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who wants to do an open pedagogy project like this? How do they tap into things they're interested in that they maybe haven't had a chance to work on with their students before? And I guess you really made me think about this because you mentioned that you were not a horticulturalist, but yet you liked the project, but you wondered if you were stepping over your bounds. And to me, that's interesting to contemplate. I don't feel like you were. I mean, I feel like it's your job to bring those kinds of things in there. I wonder if you all could speak to those kinds of things.
Well, just in that respect, I felt like it forced me to take the course that I was already teaching and just gear it toward some other subject that, yeah, I would include in the course, things like the origins of domestication. But now I made it more the feature of the course, so there was more, concentrated more of the material on that, sort of built it up along the course of the semester. So that was nice. I didn't feel like I was, we talk about imposter syndrome, and maybe there was some of that, but I knew, and the students knew, that we were doing this as a joint venture between departments, and so we were coming at it from an anthropological perspective, and that was cool. That we were sort of learning together and exploring this topic. My only advice is to be forced to do it. I mean, the UNSDG fellowship forces you to work with other people, and it was that process of being with others in the room and hearing from people that had done it the year before, and then being forced to work with a horticulturalist, for example, and come up with those ideas together. Because just sitting at home and coming up with projects is really hard because you need sort of other people's energy to come up with something new, in my experience.
I think working with a colleague was very interesting, especially we weren't in the same departments, but feeding off of each other. But the idea, I had a perfect segue because I had this nonfiction reading, and I knew that I had to teach nonfiction reading. And here is something that it really applied to, because all that stuff about clean water is nonfiction. So.
I mean, just to piggyback off of what they said, you know what you know, and you know a little bit of what you don't know. And then there are the things that you don't know. And when you work with a colleague from a completely different academic background, you push the envelope of what you don't know. And so these conversations that I had with Pamela, coming from a marketing background, and Candy coming from an educational background, they tapped into things that I had never even thought about. And many times in the meeting, I was just like, I've never thought of this. And they were stone-faced. what? I mean, everyone in the academic world is talking about this. And I'm like, I never even considered it, you know. For example, having students communicate in different languages in the classroom came up in our conversation. And I said, well, I mean, it's great if they have someone that they can talk to in the class in their own language. You know, maybe it'll help them understand math even more, you know. So I would never tell them not to talk. And they said, this is a hot issue, Mary. Everyone's discussing it. And I had no idea. Like, I had not even considered this. So they brought all of this, you know, knowledge and information that I had not thought about coming from my math background. And then I was able to bring that over to probably a whole lot of faculty who were not even thinking about it, you know, and bring this assignment to the students. And the students, I mean, they leaned in to this because it was so different from anything that they've done in a math class before. So just try to pick a collaborator who is so unique and different from yourself. And then see, you know, how you can mesh worlds.
Good question. UNESCO, maybe for Shinta. Is UNESCO a body that is accepting submissions that are done in the field? In other words, UNESCO just has its 17 standards. And it doesn't interfere with how you would do it. Whether you would have a rubric or a format or anything. Does UNESCO provide is there any place where these things will go to answer your question about, and your question about Michelle's question, how can we tell people to keep this going? And can they go there for models? Can they go there for examples or some standards that are saying, do it this way, as opposed to being wild and just shoot from there?
Well, UNESCO, if you go to the website, I apologize, my voice is kind of fading away. But UNESCO, sorry, Nia, I know you're trying to put everybody on you. UNESCO has a website that has some sort of, here's an educational best practice models. Now, what's unique about this fellowship is that this is the first ever in the world in which we've married open pedagogy with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. At least the first one in the world that we put on the map. So no one else is doing it this way. So we have the opportunity to put it to wherever. Right now, where we're putting this information is on MOST, which is the Maryland Open Source Textbook Initiative that is operated through the state of Maryland. So all of your assignments, guys, are both on our MC website as well as this MOST Maryland Online or Maryland Open Source Textbook Initiative platform. And with the KPU, they probably also have their own repository. And when I do the final remarks, I'm going to talk about expanding these partnerships to other countries around the world as well. But to answer your question, is there a platform for on the UNESCO page? There is, but not in the sense of open pedagogy and UN SDGs, because we, Montgomery College, are the first to do it. Well, thank you. Happily tell us what goes on.
I think you had a question.
Yes, maybe my question would be directed to the person that talked that talked about anthropology and how it relates to art culture and so. You know, after you work with your students and have them go through a bunch of exposures, how you do survey, how you do the field work, and how you went back and redirected to them why they should do that, and did you notice later on whether some students showed more interest in the subject matter in your field, in anthropology, or did you notice that some of them may have found out, even though at the introductory level, that it was a little on?
I did get a lot of, after introducing it, and introducing them to the work that we do, for example, in field schools and field contexts, a lot of them were interested in following this up with actual field experience, which Barbara maybe, students get excited when they see those experiences, the hands-on aspect of it. So even more than maybe the assignment was just getting out and actually like kind of acting like a field researcher, and that I think I did get a lot of interest in pursuing other sorts of field experiences that they might be able to do. one of the classes showed a lot of interest in the ethnobotany part, in the way that their own perspective and their own culture or country of origin or family was centered in the assignment, that they could choose whatever they wanted. So I'm glad I didn't just do the weed species, but they did the weed species and something of their choice. And that was something actually that from the part-time faculty, whatever that's called, meeting at the beginning of the semester, there's one on cultural inclusion, culturally inclusive teaching or something. Yeah, like photo board. What are they called? Choice boards. Yeah. Choice board, and so giving them more freedom to choose how they take assignments. And so I did see a lot of faces lighting up, and so that's nice. I mean, some of them, they just kind of did what they needed to do, but then there were others that did take. There was one student, for example, he's originally from California, actually, but his grandparents lived in California. They produce almonds. They sell those to the Blue Diamond Company.
Oh, wow.
And he said that he grew up around almonds and had been, shaking them off trees, but he had never talked to his grandparents about almonds. So he took this opportunity and called them up and, basically interviewed them to ask about their family connection to almonds, where they came from and how that happened. And then his grandparents, so he had pictures of his grandparents on the PowerPoint, and then the grandparents sent him little individually bagged almonds for everyone in the class, and so everyone had little almonds while he was presenting. So it did allow students that freedom and that sort of passion to pursue something of interest to them personally.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have another one. If you want.
Okay, sure.
Question for Manuel. I remember you were explaining the different perspective of students, some from China and some from here, how they attitude towards math. It looks like Chinese students have certain attributes and characteristics, and students here have certain characteristics. Would you say that maybe those in China are more are easier to teach or are more motivated to learn math than the students here, or there is some similarities?
That's an interesting question. So I've never really considered the motivation level of my students based on sort of cultural lines. So motivation-wise, I would say that I don't actually notice a significant difference in a student's motivation.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned something about intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, so the motivation, is much different than performance, right? So, so I have not personally noticed a difference in motivation. Yeah.
So we have heard so many beautiful software applications. Are they being combined together in some place in Elite with tools that are available for us? I think there is some place in Elite where it mentions about software. So some of these that have been mentioned here can be added then.
Get a list.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a question for Shinta.
I will make that's a note.
Okay, well, we want to thank all three of you for being here today. I think each one of the presentations is having valuable information that we all learned from. So we hope that you had a good time, everybody. And now we just want Shinta to give us a little bit of information about
Yes, exactly. So thank you again to the three of you. To the three of you for your work and dedication and just plowing through. So one of the things that Zeb and I think Mary Beth and Mary also alluded to was with this particular fellowship that it's a very long name, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Open Pedagogy Faculty Fellowship. Okay, we've not figured out a way to succinct it, but nonetheless, what we as in Dr. Michael Mills and I, when we created this fellowship a couple of years ago, was we said to ourselves, good change happens when we take people out of their comfort zone and put them into an uncomfortable spot. And these three have definitely told us that they've been uncomfortable with the process and with like collaborating with people they don't know, collaborating with people outside of their disciplines, outside of their campuses, and in these three cases, outside of their institutions. So thank you very much for venturing into a different world. A couple of things about the fellowship. If you are interested, this is the second cohort. Next year, the next summer, it's a summer fellowship. We are going to put out the applications around February, March for you to consider, and you're going to need. There's a very brief application about what do you think you'll get out of this particular fellowship, what United Nations Sustainable Development Goal do you want to work on, who do you want to work with in terms of discipline. Maybe if you're an economics instructor, do you want to work with somebody in, say, English or sociology or whatever the case may be. If you are a Rockville person, the other criteria is that you have to work with somebody who is not from your campus. Again, that's pushing the envelope there. And in some cases, like the two of the three here, you might be working with somebody who's not from your institution. So moving forward, we're actually expanding these partnerships. So we're going to continue our partnership with KPU in Canada. But I just got an email, Mike Mills, Rajiv Janjani, who's the lead at KPU, and I just received an email confirming that the person at Maricopa in the state of Arizona wants to jump on this and wants to solidify the partnership. So for the next summer fellowship, we're going to include Maricopa. What we're also going to include, we're hoping that we are going to solidify with Keene State in New Hampshire, and there are a couple of other places throughout the country who are interested as well. We are also putting in a proposal to the U.S. Embassy in Moscow for us to visit Russia, to be able to do this with Russian colleagues. And particularly, one of the projects would be to look at Lake Baikal. I don't know if you're familiar with Lake Baikal in Siberia. I'm just learning this as I'm part of this whole proposal. It's the largest saltwater lake in the entire world. So there's an opportunity there to do a number of different things from many different discipline angles. So that'll be interesting. So if we get that proposal granted, a bunch of us will be going to Russia. We're also trying to expand this to Ethiopia. That's been a slower conversation, but we're hoping to be able to solidify that as well. And so you can see the vast impact that this potentially can have, not only with the faculty colleagues and the institutions that they represent, but the students more importantly, because at the end of the day, it's the students who do these assignments. It's the students who become the agents of change in our communities. And when we can get those students to help us do the work, to help us improve the world in many different ways, the world will eventually become a better place, right? Now, speaking of students, the culmination of these faculty fellows' work will be a student showcase. So I would like for you to save the date, Tuesday, February 25th at 2:30 to 4:30, Rockville campus, Science West 301. This will be a student showcase in which each of the fellows will present and highlight one or two of their best students. Those one or two students each will come up and present their work. Last year, it was phenomenal. I mean, the students were very articulate. The students were showing us their projects, how impactful they were in the communities. And in fact, some of those students we kept bringing back. So don't be surprised if we ask you guys to do some more additional presentations, because it's just wonderful to be able to hear and see the projects and actually see what it looks like in the communities. So please save the date for the student showcase. And like I said, the application for the next summer fellowship will come out in February or March. So thank you so much for attending, and we hope you learned a lot. Thank you.